Welcome to another edition of Real Talk, Straight Talk. Once again, you know what did I say last week? I was so happy because I was surrounded by ladies.
Yes.
I'm not in the middle, but I get to look at you all.
Right, there you go.
To my, it's my right. I always get mixed up. Left, right, yeah, okay. To my right, Carol, welcome to Real Talk, Straight Talk.
Thank you for having me.
To my further right, I don't need to introduce her, but you know, I will anyway. Miss Melissa Alder.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Good, nice to be here again.
Ladies, it's a hot day.
It is.
Very hot.
Oh my goodness. Thank God we're at the Fix Hair Salon, you know, one of the places that we shoot at. So I'm gonna give a shout out to Angel at the Fix. Gotta send another shout out to the guys at Uplight 7 Barbershop. It puts on the whole crew over there. The guys at Paranite Bar and Grill. Who am I forgetting? Of course, Irie Market that just opened 2 weeks ago. Also got to send a shout out to the guys out in Ottawa, 613 area code, Rhythm Movements Community Association along with Flow Seniors. And finally, I got to send another shout out to the guys in Hamilton, Soul Kitchen Radio. You know who I forgot?
Yeah.
Pride. I got to send a very special shout out to one of our biggest sponsors, Pride, Steven and the crew over there. And last but not least, Natalie and the crew at RBC. Once again, this is another edition of Real Talk, Straight Talk, part 2 on politics.
Yes.
And
Well, part 3?
Is this part 3?
Yep. Because we had the first one, we had an intro, then last week, NDP, and then today.
I stand corrected. And if I'm going to do politics, you know, I got to go with somebody that's so outspoken as Melissa. So,
Thank you. Maybe too outspoken, too transparent.
Never, never, never. So I'm going to let you give us a little, you know, a little background, not background.
Background about me?
No, I'm going to let you take us through the last 2 weeks and then we'll come
Okay,
back.
perfect. Okay, that's great. So a few weeks ago we started and we just had, it was just you and myself, and we had conversations about politics, how, you know, the Black community participates in voting and what are their stance on, you know, on politics and what can we do to educate the next generation about politics and having representation as well. So that was one element that we talked about. And some of our lived experiences with voting and not voting and also comparing to various countries that we're back home where we're from and how politics also has a play, right? And then last week we had the NDP and Penny Sattler, and it was just had good conversations about what she has done in her experiences as an MP, and because right now she's a candidate right now, and she discussed more about what the policies she's done and, you know, the passion projects she had and the changes she's made. And then also we had some questions about representation again, and then it was interesting that we discovered that there was a Black caucus with NDP, NDP, and that was interesting. And I was able to find that they have an actual Instagram people, and they actually have on a face group as well. So please follow them if you want to find out more leaders. And also we're talking again about representation. And also too, we discuss about what the pathway, what got you into politics and what led you to politics. Because a lot of times students don't know and people don't know the story, the story behind the politicians and the people who are representing the community.
Yeah.
Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I think you got the summary.
Okay, good.
So with that being said,
There you go.
I want to once again welcome Carol to the show, and I want her to tell us a little bit about yourself. I did a little research.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I want to hear it from your own words.
So I am originally from British Columbia. I moved here 15 years ago with my family because my husband got a job at Western. I guess if you were to say, how did I get involved in politics, I would say things started way, way back when I was about 7 years old. 7 is when I really started to become aware of environmental issues and really started to get involved in that kind of area. By the time I was 15, I helped organize recycling in my high school, which did not exist in the 1990s. And I was just telling somebody about this story and they thought it was absolutely crazy. I would go and actually pick up all the recycling from all the classrooms by myself and bring it to where it needed to go. Right. So this was a passion of mine, and I ended up going into the degrees that I did were involved in environmental law, environmental policy, and then conservation science. And it was while I was living in England that I discovered what a bad reputation Canada had, a hugely bad reputation among scientists, because under the government of the time, which was Stephen Harper's government, scientists were not allowed to share the information that they found regarding climate change. And people kept saying, like, what is wrong with your government? And it really takes leaving your country to realize, you know, within your country you think, you know, you're great, everything's great. You have to leave the country to realize what other people's perceptions are. Right. And every program that I've ever done has been a very international program. So I've met people, the last program I did, there was people from 6 different continents, obviously not Antarctica, but all the others. And so there was people from low-lying states like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, places like that that have really suffered. And they had serious issues with this. And I thought, that's it. You know, I have to do something about this. So in 2015, when there was the call out for a candidate for London North Centre, I thought, if I'm really going to set a good example for my kids, then I'm just going to go for it. Now, I didn't think I would get it. I mean, who am I? I'm nobody. And anyways, I ended up being the candidate, and now I've run 4 times. But that is, that's basically me. That's how I got into it, was just because I felt like Canada could be doing more, and if I couldn't just stay on the sidelines and just criticize without getting involved. So that's me.
Before I get into the tough questions, I want to get into something a little bit more personal. I think we asked Peggy the same question, is to give us a little play-by-play on a campaign, on what it takes to start a campaign, set up a campaign. As a Green, the campaigns are quite different from the large parties. So we work with a lot less. So we are small but mighty. We have a very small team usually. And you can actually see from, if you go and look at what the campaign expenditures are. Yes. For instance, I think in 2015, I spent maybe $3,000, and my opponent who won spent over $100,000. So we're working with a lot less. Yes. We don't take any corporate sponsored, like donations or union. It's all through individuals. So to
Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
So that we aren't owned by anybody.
Okay.
Because if you take donations from a business, then the thought is that you're going to return a favor.
Exactly.
We don't want that.
Okay.
No.
Right. There's a transaction involved.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about being independent and being able to do the right thing without being, influenced in a way that, could make you make a decision that isn't in the best interests of the citizens. So absolutely crucial. So yeah, we're working with a lot less. And I would say for what you do, I mean,
I'll just say on a day-to-day, I'm usually up by 5 a.m. and I'm answering emails and then getting the kids up, getting them off to school, and then running from place to place to place, knocking on doors. Not everyone appreciates you showing up at the door, especially depending which party you're with.
Right.
Because I don't have like, we're a much smaller team, I'm usually writing, I write all my own speeches, and so I'm usually writing them just before I have to go somewhere, and I'm in the car and I'm just practicing them, saying, okay, this is what I'm going to say. But then I get there and I just start winging it anyways. It just,
Right.
yeah, it's just whatever you're feeling at the moment, and then you just say it.
And the message you want to present, and that's what you're
Exactly.
passionate about,
Well,
and
and
then
actually-
the issues that are happening. 'Cause
Exactly.
you can write a speech, but then something may happen that morning or the afternoon, and then you're going to
Exactly.
have to address
Yeah.
that, or you have a different mindset from the
Yeah.
morning of, or what have you.
Well, so that was something that was interesting. Was yesterday I was on CBC with Kate Graham and Terrence Kernahan,
yes,
and
great people.
on the way there, I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about the news, and they were talking about how people still don't have power from the storm that happened a week and a half ago. So I was like, well, obviously I have to mention that. Are you
Right.
kidding me? I got to mention it. So usually I'll get there. And so for the conclusions, you usually have a closing statement, and I used to write something for that. But often you get a feel for what works and what doesn't. So we were actually at the mosque on the weekend, again, Kate Graham and Terrence Kernahan and I. And I just thought, no, this is what I'm going to close with now. And it was nothing that I'd written or thought of. It was just, these are the issues that matter. So if you were to go on script with something that you'd written, it could be so tone deaf. Like absolutely tone
And it
deaf.
looks staged, and it also looks performative.
Yeah.
So sometimes too, and I believe sometimes when you do write speeches, sometimes there's also a way, I always look at it as a way of journaling, of ways to kind of process your ideas, because then it's in your back of your mind, but then you always can pull those ideas afterwards, right?
Exactly. And so much of what I say anyways are from experiences from
Right.
my own life.
Okay.
So for me, the climate and the environment are deeply personal issues, or if we're talking about disability or, any issues like that, mental health, for me, I'm drawing on my own personal experiences and things that are deeply personal for me. And so doing something formulaic just to me feels wrong.
Yeah.
I know I want to engage with people as a human being. So anyways, that's basically a day. I live off coffee, and dinner sometimes just seems great, stealing some onion rings from your kids. So by the end of it, you're just exhausted, so tired.
Yeah.
But for me, it's worth it in the end, because I feel like you've helped get people talking about issues that are important. You've changed the dialogue. I often say, like, if I wasn't there, people wouldn't talk about environmental issues. And for me, environmental issues are social justice issues. Full stop. Yeah.
So you equate environmental issues as social justice issues?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I do, because if you think about a year ago when there was the heat dome that happened in British Columbia and 600 people died, the people that are dying are people that are low income. They're often racialized people or people with addictions or mental health issues. And so if we are not addressing this issue on how we're going to make sure that people have homes, or at least as a social justice issue, even if we're to look at an international scale, if you have the wealthiest nations that are bellowing out lots of greenhouse gases, and you have small island states.
Right, in the environment, and taking the land
Taking
from
the
the
land.
marginalized.
Exactly.
And profiting off of
and with the
smaller communities.
And with the small island states, they are not the ones that are contributing to greenhouse gases, and they are losing their homes. Then they're becoming environmental migrants, or they're exiting where they have to go. Then they're going to other nations where they're treated as lesser than, and it creates an entire problem. And people aren't recognizing this, that there are environmental refugees that are treated as lesser than, but it is not their fault that their land has become arid, that they don't have access to water. This
Clean water. Well,
exactly, and it leads to wars.
Well, clean water right now in Canada, like, come on now.
Exactly. Well, so that's the other thing. If we were to think about Indigenous people that still don't have access to clean water, that to me is a social justice issue, and it's an environmental issue,
Yeah.
so it's an environmental racist issue.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
do you think the message that you just explained does not make it the way it's supposed to? Because
No.
when you look at the Green Party, first impressions, you hear climate change. But how many people put that climate change, especially once you get into low-income families,
Yeah.
we put climate change into, okay, this is how it affects us.
And they don't. And that's why I say, like, each time that there's an election, I feel like this is my opportunity to try to get people to understand the message that we're trying to say. So if we look at especially climate change and how there's going to be issues with the storms or rising temperatures or extreme weather, and people are living in a housing insecure situation. Let's say they haven't been able to properly insulate their homes or
keep up with their electrical hydro bill.
Exactly. So this is the situation. They get into a trap where you have to pay so much more for your hydro bills because you don't have a properly insulated house. So then you can't save to make the repairs that you need to do it. And you keep getting into this cycle that keeps you in a situation of poverty. And not only that, it makes you more at risk for whenever there is an extreme weather event, such as a heat event. And we see that a number of the schools don't have air conditioning, and it's usually the lower income schools. And in that case, the kids can't even think. They can't learn. You can't learn if you're so hot that you can't do that. So for me, it's, it's trying to get that message across that people don't think about otherwise. They're not making the connections of how...
Well, the connections are never made, to be honest.
Right.
This is the first time, I'm being truthful with you right now. This is the first time, because we're social justice activists and we do a lot of advocacy work in the community. And this is the first time that I've actually hearing from you is having the connection about the concept of environmental racism and how the idea about lower socioeconomic is always associated with a certain class, a certain race at times, and how a lot of times the people are taken advantage of and then don't have the resources to to have equitable opportunity to clean air, access to water, and all those other elements, right?
Well, and these are things like, as I said, it's hard for us to try to get that message out, but only because...
Why? Why is it hard?
Because we're working... Because we are constantly drowned out by voices that have more money to put the message out there. So we try very hard to get that message out, but we're not getting heard. And I try my best. Like, I'm knocking on as many doors as I can, but my team is tiny.
Right.
And I can agree with you on that, but here's the thing. Going to your website. If I go to your website and I look,
like my personal website?
On the Green Party's website.
Oh, the Green Party. Okay.
So I'm going to the Green Party. I see that they talk about housing, they talk about climate change, they talk about healthcare, mental health, right? Which is great. And that's an overall view. What you just explained about, especially about the economic side of it, right? I don't see that on your website. So your website looks to me as, I would say middle class.
White middle class.
White middle class. White middle class.
Right.
It does.
But here
this is great. This is great to hear this.
Right. It looks like white middle class.
Okay.
You know what? The only time I changed is when I actually did a scroll on the candidates. So I wanted to see what the makeup of the candidates were, right?
Right, yeah.
Counted them. There was about 124 candidates overall, right? Of which I believe 19 were visible minorities.
Cool.
Right? And that alone said that there's a higher percentage than I would have normally thought, because if you don't scroll through to see who the candidates are, and you just go and you take that minute, because let's
Making
face
assumptions.
it, when people go to a website, it's a minute or two.
Yeah.
If I went through that first minute and I wasn't doing homework, I would have said, okay, this is, once again, a white middle class party.
But then now I'll push back. Then I'll also talk about if there's 19 candidates, 19 part of the Green Party, then we're talking about representation. Where are the voices to share the highlights of what they've experienced and what they've seen to highlight to help people understand that? But similar to, like representation matters, but what voice, what's their stand and what's their voice and what have they done to actually amplify the awareness of environmental racism or social, Green Party affiliated with the social justice element of inequitable, access to,
Absolutely. So, I don't know if you know this. Do you know who the leader is? Obviously, Mike Schreiner.
Yes.
And the two deputy leaders. Diane Sachs, who is the
Yes.
former environmental commissioner, and
Yeah,
then
former,
Abjeet
yeah.
Mane, who is a visible minority and also youth, a young person. And so, like, our intention is, and obviously there's always more work to be done, like always. It's never a finished process, ever. But to make sure that all the voices are heard. And so there are parts in our platform. So you see our platform, but unless you go through every part, under the different sections, like when you look at small business, we have a separate bullet point specifically for amplifying BIPOC businesses, small businesses, and removing barriers to make it easier. We have, like, throughout the platform different points to help with that. And I know it's, there's always more to
No,
do
it's
in
not.
both voices.
It just makes it harder because, once again, the average person, when they go to the website, right?
I know.
It's a minute or 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So if it's on page 3 of that website, if it's under here, and
Yeah.
there's nothing right there to grab their attention,
Yeah, no,
that
that's
says,
true.
You should actually have a tab or something that
Yeah,
actually
something that
just
says.
affiliate people talk about social justice and inequity and not having their
Yeah,
voices heard.
yeah.
So that'll be something, I don't know, down the road later on, party figures that out.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the one thing that I would say with every single election. I talk to so many different people in so many different communities, and for me, because obviously this is
Yeah.
my 4th time, for me it's a learning experience every single time, and finding out what is really important to people. Like, I go to extremely low income areas, people that are on disability. I talk to a variety of communities, and it's, for me, learning what is not working for people, and then making sure that we listen and adjust. So, if anything that is shared tonight, for me, that is important to know for the future. So if it comes off as like we're not reaching people through our messaging, we clearly need to fix that, because obviously that's not helping us in any way. And for me, the ultimate goal is to make sure that people, ultimately I feel like environmental issues are the great equalizer, and yet they're not. So we will all suffer when the environment is not going the way it's supposed to. There was so many people who had their houses destroyed. However, they're going to affect people of certain communities so much more
can't
than
bounce back.
others.
You can't bounce back, right?
Yes, and the businesses as well, like people who cannot bounce back if their small business has been destroyed. And as we said, there's still businesses that don't have electricity now. So it is an equalizer in that we can all suffer from it. I mean, again, coming from British Columbia and the forest fires there and the floods and the heat dome, everyone is affected by that, but some people experience it to a much more severe degree than others. And that's why, for me, it's a social justice issue that we have to deal
It
with.
takes away their livelihood.
Yeah, but not only just their livelihood, their lives.
Exactly.
Like, quite literally, their lives. And this is the issue, like with, I've talked to doctors, they always want to talk to all the different candidates and explain about the issues that they're seeing with climate change and the number of children they're seeing come into the hospitals in respiratory distress because of increased air pollution, particularly from forest fires, because the smoke comes down.
Right.
Again, this is a situation that you are going to find is going to affect children in marginalized communities more, especially in Indigenous communities.
Yes.
So this is like something that is unacceptable and needs to be addressed, and you can't continue to have people profiting off of, say, building highways, which are just going to contribute to the problem, when others are bearing the burden of that.
Well said.
Yeah.
Do you think the party focuses too much on climate change
No,
or environmental issues?
no.
So then my question would be then, where's the stance about like with education?
Okay, so
So we're talking about opportunities, but like we know that Indigenous students and Black students are, or students of color are marginalized or don't have a lot of opportunities or
Yeah.
facing systemic barriers. So where's the stance on that to support them, or students who have a learning disability, who are on an IEP, an individual education plan? So where's the stance on supporting students who are not part of the status quo?
Okay. So yeah, I'm going to answer that,
Yeah.
but first I'm going to answer
Perfect.
this, and I'm going to say
Good.
why I don't feel like we focus too much on climate change, and this is why. I would say the thing that distinguishes the Green Party from the other parties is that the other parties treat the environment, they put it off in a silo, and they treat it separately. In my personal opinion, but I think also the Greens, is that you can't treat that as something separate, because the air we breathe, the water we drink, the farmland we have to provide food, these are all things that are crucial to our survival. And when we look at how we are going to deal with issues, building our economy, making our cities resilient, dealing with transportation or urban development, we should really be taking an environmental and a climate lens to that. Putting it off to the side it's just like a false dichotomy that does not work. You have to put the two together. So that's why I say I don't feel like we focus too much on it, because ultimately when we take care of environment, we're also taking care of each other, and it builds for a stronger economy.
And when I say it's not putting, I don't mean to say it's being put aside. I mean, are you spending a disappropriate amount of time just focused, which is different from putting it aside?
Yes, no,
right?
okay, but it's just that when we look at, say, housing, we take a climate lens to that. When we look at health, we also take an environmental lens to that. And when I say that, it's like for us, when you look at environmental issues, it's better to deal with something before it becomes a crisis, rather than have it be a crisis situation. So again, for healthcare, I look at the example about how we very much believe that we should have proactive, preventative healthcare. That means addressing issues like diabetes and things like that before you have the person in the hospital. So having universal pharmacare, having universal dental care, making sure that people have access to a family doctor in rural areas, maybe having access to a nurse practitioner, making sure that people have access to that diabetes medication before they're at a situation where maybe they have to be amputated and then they're living on disability. For us, it's about doubling the disability payments, because if you have people living in poverty, poverty is the #1 determinant for ill health. So it's more of a philosophy for us that it's better to invest in people more and their well-being initially, because not only does it save the government money in long term, but it's also better for people's well-being. And that should be the ultimate goal of government, is to take care of people. So then to answer your question about education. So we very much obviously believe that personally, I think we need to go through all of the textbooks that we have, all of them. And obviously, like some of the things that we read when I went to school in the 1980s, like cringeworthy, horrific. That needs to go. Absolutely needs to go. We need to go through and really make sure that we have inclusive books. Textbooks includes everything, even the math textbooks, because we've even seen that math textbooks can be extremely racist. And it's about teaching. For me, I really think that from the earliest age, it's about teaching inclusivity, teaching about different religions, different beliefs, different cultures, different languages. I mean, that's what makes us really rich as you know, a global society. So for me, that's very important. And one thing I would say, I know that there's a lot that we have within our Green Party policies about that, I mean, making sure that things are inclusive. But one thing about the Greens is that we don't like mandate exactly what the candidates have to say. So as an actual individual person, you're allowed to fight for what you believe is important.
But then once again, how does that message come across? Because when you go to that main page of the NDP party, not NDP, sorry,
the
Greens, and you see, like I said, the first thing is you see the climate change, the environment, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
You don't see things like, let's talk about the Black community. You don't see things about addressing racism. And I'll give you a little statistics that we found out, right? In 2019, and this is through Stats Canada, 46% of the people that they talked to said they experienced racism in the last 5 years.
And I don't doubt it.
Right?
Yeah.
But that might be you personally might say, okay, I'm going to fight for the marginalized communities. But unless that makes its way to the main page of your platform, then there's a disconnect.
Yeah,
right?
no, I agree with that.
Because
I mean, I think, like, while it is in our platform, as somebody pointed out to me today, I was out knocking on doors and my phone was pinging constantly, and this was more about Indigenous issues. And, you know, we have an entire section, and she said that I believe it was a she, but hard to tell because it's Twitter and you don't really know by the handles. But she said, I've got this 128-page document in front of me, and I'm supposed to find where the part is that you were saying that you were going to address Indigenous issues. And that's the thing. We shouldn't expect that everybody is going to just sift through 128 pages.
You have to make it. You have to make it accessible.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
also being transparent, and then in ways that because you're talking about the concept of working in silos, but it's also now you're siloing the information on one-page document and not having, still having one-page document, but have ways to share that information.
And that's the thing is if you actually, that's why it's hard because I know you want it to be front and center in there, and I know that because I've read, I just mean to make it easy to find.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing. So there's a shorter version of our platform, and if you go through and read it in all the different, in every subcategory, there is something that it deals with BIPOC, or whether it's dealing with LGBTQ2S, or whether it's dealing with Indigenous issues, and it's all the way through. But so it's been woven throughout, but it's not put in a separate area, and so that maybe is a fault on our part that we should have put it in a separate section, but we were trying to weave it through housing, small business, education, how it needs to be addressed under each issue. We have about addressing racism in the healthcare system, but it's under healthcare. It's not on a separate page.
It's not.
So you have to read through all of it, which again is a lot to ask people. And I know all the even the Liberal platform is even longer than ours.
Exactly,
it's huge. But you're trying to get out as much information as you can for people, and then
the difference between the Liberals and other parties and the Greens is that you guys are newer. Right?
Yeah, we're working with a lot less.
Right.
Working a lot less, and they have ways to.
You're working with less, right?
Yeah.
But there is a perception that the Liberals have more just on the top, on the surface, that they're more open to diversity, even the other parties. But when you look at, like I said, because you're newer, you have things that you want to get out.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the prioritizing what gets out
Yeah,
first.
I
And
guess.
that's where I see the minority or the racialized message gets lost. Right?
Yeah, no,
Even though
I
you
agree.
have, and the funniest thing is in terms of representation of your candidates, you're a little bit above the norm.
Yeah,
Right.
we are,
You're-
and we were for federally as well in
you're above the norm.
2019 and 2021. We are above the norm. It's just we are constantly fighting against misperceptions of who we are as a
Right, of
party,
course.
and it means that we're constantly rehashing the same issues over and over. Because usually when I go to the door, the first thing I get the door slammed in my face a lot. They're just right away, not interested, slam. So it is very hard for us to get our message out. That's why I accept every invitation that we have.
Yes.
But then on top of that, I'm trying to get over the barrier of people just saying, well, you guys only care about the environment. That's not. I mean, we care about the environment, but in the way that it affects every single aspect of our lives.
But then we understand you care about the environment, and obviously you've been, this is your, third campaign? Fourth campaign, right?
Yeah.
And how long has the party been around?
Along the 80s.
Right. And if since then to now you haven't realized that maybe I'm overselling climate change. And when I say it's not even overselling it, but you've made it such a focus that it's become your whole identity. And there's nothing wrong with having an identity, but you also have to know that there's other things in there. You're not addressing it in a way so that it's shown. So.
But I would say this, though. We came out with our housing strategy a year ago, so it came out well before our climate change policy. Then we came out with the first ever mental health care strategy before any other party did as a standalone thing.
But the message is getting lost in the end because of you're so strongly associated with
the intent versus impact.
Right.
Yeah.
You're so strongly.
But we're also working with.
Right.
I would say this, our biggest problem is
challenges, maybe?
Our challenge, our biggest challenge.
Let's go with challenge.
Our greatest challenge is our current electoral system, because it means that it is that much harder for us to get our messages out. So it's like you're constantly
system.
swimming upstream. And then it makes it, so even if we come out with these great, and again, the NDP had to fight really hard to get where they are right now, like really hard. And it took them a long time to get where they are.
Yes.
And we're just in that same process. And we're just going through our growth and trying to become a strong party. And I feel like we'll get there. But right now we have this situation where people are more interested in strategic voting than actually knowing who we are and what we bring to the table. And so as much as I can try, and as I said, it's very hard to get your message across when people will, number one, not look at your platform, not look at your strategies, and then slam the door in your face.
Make assumptions.
How can you? And then also, I would point out that only this year did we get to have a green at the debates, at the leaders' debates. We didn't get to have them in 2018, 2014. So how could we get our message out? How? So do you know how we did that? We had Mike Schreiner in a separate room, and we were putting it on YouTube, streaming it live on Twitter, so that people could even hear our message, because they were not even invited to the CBC debates. And in 2018, I wasn't invited to everything. I still don't get invited to everything because I am the Green candidate. So how hard is it to get that message out that we have a mental health strategy? And then we were saying so strongly, we will double ODSP payments immediately. We will do this immediately because this is an absolute human rights violation, that people with disabilities are living far below the poverty line.
Yes, yes.
And then the NDP say afterwards, well, they're going to double it, but after a year and all this stuff. And then now everyone is talking about that, but we'd been saying this since September.
Right.
And it's so hard because you can say things, but if you actually look in the media, like every time they cover the Greens, it's like way down there. So we're trying our best, but we don't get the same coverage. And this is the first year that our leader got to actually be on TV for everyone to see. So
it's interesting. It was interesting how politics work.
Yeah.
That that to be invited to have it, because we always talk about being invited to the table, to have voices be heard. It's unfortunate that your party wasn't invited at the table. So that's disconcerting as well. But it's interesting to see that from like the budget element as well. Like, shouldn't it also be equitable? Shouldn't all the parties get like a certain, and I know it's all about sponsorship and all that and lobbyists, and I know there's a system, but it would be really interesting about how if everybody had the equal opportunity of of advertising, whatever, to be intentional with the message and see how strong they are, and then see that instead of like being, you know what I mean? It's just, it's all about money.
Well, absolutely.
And power, and money has power and way for media to communicate.
Well, and this is the thing with strategic voting, and people wanting to get rid of a certain party, that means the votes go towards two parties, and because there's per vote payment, so every vote that is cast, that party gets money for that vote. So every vote that is denied us because of strategic voting, we don't get that money. Plus, you get over a certain percent of the votes, then you get the money back that you spent on your campaign. So if you're a Liberal, NDP, or Conservative, and you've spent over $100,000 on a campaign, and you're going to get 60% back, you know you're getting over $60,000 back. Keep in mind, my campaign is like $3,000 some odd dollars. Like, I'm just trying to get a message out there.
I think this is the only time I'm going to say there's some similarities in the message between what you're saying and what when we had the PPC party on.
Yeah.
And I believe it or not, Mark Emery, he actually in a roundabout way he was saying the same thing. I think the difference is he was so not forceful, but Mark is
passionate.
Mark.
He's passionate.
He's just smart, right?
Yeah.
I want you to explain the vote, what you're talking about even more, so that a person gets an idea. Let's say I'm extremely unknowledgeable about anything.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm thinking that yes, you have a party, you should be able to be on TV, you should be able to do this and that, right? We understand the politics in the terms of not having enough money to run your campaign. But there are other challenges, and I want you to get those challenges out so people get a clear understanding of the political system. Because one of the things that I think we talked about, the things we tend to talk about on this podcast is, let's get people out to vote, let's do this. But we've never really truly talked about the challenges of a small party such as yourself, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, it really just does boil down to the whole issue of our first past the post system, because it contributes to all the problems that we see. Because I know for a fact that knocking on the doors, there are so many people who say, oh, I've voted for Green before, I've donated to Green before, but if they feel fear that their vote is going to be wasted.
Strategic voting, right?
Then they do strategic voting. And yeah, what it means is that somebody was actually explaining this today when we were knocking on doors. They're like, it means that if you really believe in something, and this is what you believe in, you're always voting for second best. And I mean, what this leads to is voter apathy, and then you get people who just refuse to vote at all, and you're not getting a good system. And it's always because, and the other parties that are involved in the strategic voting, they have come right out openly and said, you need to vote strategically. They have said that. And as soon as they've done that, then that means people are like, well, I'm not going to vote Green. And when I ran in 2015, there was an organization, and I won't mention their name, but they were going around dropping flyers in everyone's house telling everyone exactly who they should vote for to strategically vote. So not only was I working against the other three main parties, I was also working against a nonprofit organization that had more money than my campaign, telling everyone not to vote for me, to vote for this group. And on top of that, I had a media outlet that I've always very much respected. They did a news report on me and basically said in that news report that if it was essentially like, if the Conservative win, it's all my fault. So yeah, so I was working against, you're working against everybody. So with the per vote thing that I'm saying is that every time you vote for a party, that they get money for that, and then it just keeps building their coffer, which means that they have more that they can invest, which makes it very hard for the smaller parties. I will say this, you see my green signs everywhere. I did not purchase a single green sign. Those green signs are from my previous election and for other people's elections, and they were in my backyard, and my eldest child washed them all for the volunteer hours for high school. Yep. And we just put the same ones out there because we thought, well, this will save us some money if we do this or we do that.
Right.
Focus more on our messaging. So yeah, the bigger parties can put out so much more than we can. And then for the strategic voting, yeah, when people say that they are going to strategic vote, one thing that I do say over and over again is that if you actually vote for the Greens, like if that's what you really believe, even if I don't win, you've sent a message to the other three parties that that is what you think is the right thing to do. So if you strongly believe, for instance, that ODSP should be doubled immediately, vote for the Green, don't vote for the other one. Because that might not happen. You might not, the other parties take notice every time Greens get votes because that is a threat to them.
Because it's taking away.
It's taking away. So then they'll alter their platform. And every time they alter that, I mean,
and maybe adapt or take a little ideas of yours and then amplify it, like how you just mentioned.
Which, yeah, the NDP did 4 times.
They take the Coles notes from your version.
They
and
did.
Then, yeah.
The NDP did that quite a lot recently, which again, we say, you know, that's fine as long as you actually do it, because for us it's less about the power, it's more about just doing the right thing by
doing
people.
the work, right?
Exactly. Like, I'm not in this for power. I mean, this is my 4th time.
Right.
It's not like I get paid to do this. It's a lot of work and a lot of time. But it's something that I feel very passionately about, that, you know, our government is there supposed to help us. And it's not about just, you know, making a lot of money building highways and paving over farmland and, you know, just making certain people richer and other people suffer. Like, that's just not what government is supposed to be about. So, yeah, sorry, I think I got a little off track from your question.
No, but that makes sense, though.
It's been a long day. But yeah, for the voting, like it's the worst thing that I can hear at a door, because I just think I've put in so much work, I've tried so hard, and it's all going to come down to your dislike of another party rather than the fact that you actually believe strongly in something that one particular party says. And right now, there's only one group, well, besides people who are actually voting green that feel very strongly about it, but there's only one other group, and even the Liberal candidate has said the same thing, that feels that fiercely strong, and that's the New Blue. The people are voting for New Blue, and that is going to bring with it its own challenges. Yeah. So, well.
You know, in a racialized community, economically challenged community, the idea of voting for voting for who you actually believe, as opposed to thinking that, you know what, I need change, right? But if I vote green, then I don't think it's going to get there. And once again, it comes down to strategic voting.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to talk about, I guess, situations such as myself. When I come in and I look, I've tried to vote along the lines of who I like. I think this year definitely I'm voting for who I like. I'm going to go on record and say that I've done strategic voting.
Okay. Which riding are you in? Are you in Fanshawe or West? West. Okay.
Yeah, West.
Yeah.
When it comes to being in a racial, minority community and all that, and like I said, I'm thinking, who's going to get me results, right? Where's my vote going to count, right? There are things that I believe, and like I said, I voted strategically.
Yeah.
How do we get that message across, and how do we really say to our communities, yes, we know you've had your challenges, right?
Yeah. But I
you really
wonder,
have to,
in West, did you really vote strategically, or did you like the person as well? You don't have to tell me who it is, but I'm just wondering, did you like them as well?
This year I'm
it was strategic fully?
No. This year I'm actually voting for someone that I actually like. I'm actually going.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm even going to go on record and say, I'm not sure if they're going to win, right? But I'm going, right?
Yeah.
I'm even going to go on record and say, and that takes a lot, because
it does take guts,
right.
but in the end, this is the thing. I feel like when you vote for what you actually, like the person that you actually like, even if things don't work out, and especially, I mean, London West, we know who's going to win. we all know who's going to win. So.
Okay.
In that sense, when you voted, if you know that you voted with the person that you felt strongly about, you have no regrets. That's how I feel about it. And I mean, it's hard because
but what about the person that's thinking, oh, I want change? Man, I can deal with regret later, but I want a little bit of change, and I think if I vote this way, I can get the change.
Yeah. Well, I just think back to 2015, and I think about a promise that was made that it would be the last first past the post, and then that didn't happen. And I think that honestly, for me, I'm tired of the conversations with the strategic voting, and I really just wish we could get past this, because in my mind, we are never going to get where we need to get as a country if we are constantly in these 4-year chunks and going back and forth between different parties that don't like each other and aren't making long-term plans. We need to be making long-term plans.
Short-term.
And then it changes. And it changes.
So then it's nothing. So it's kind of like, it's like you're going. It's like a car just keeps like stalling.
Exactly. And then programs get taken apart.
Starts all over
again. And it's a
again.
waste of tax dollars, and nobody knows what's actually happening. And it's just, you're not building towards something. And for me, it's like
progression.
We're at a point where, for 7 years I've been doing this, and nothing has changed, and it is annoying as all get out, because we're not solving problems. It's just the different parties bickering with each other endlessly. And all I want is to see us get to a point where no matter, because everybody is coming from their own perspective.
Right.
Everyone has a story. Everyone has a view, and we can come together on something. So we use this example. I was on the Rogers debate with New Blue, and also there was these surveys that were put in for the cycling advocacy group. And I'm like, well, I don't have a lot in common with New Blue, but they asked a question about cycling, and I was expecting him to say, oh, cycling, like whatever. And he went on, like, yes, we need to have safe cycling infrastructure. We need to make sure that people's lives aren't lost. And I'm like, wait a minute. don't agree with anything else really that he's saying, but well, there we've got some common ground. Even though we are from two very different perspectives, we can agree that lives should not be lost by people cycling on the roads. And, you know, obviously safe cycling infrastructure is good for the environment and good for air quality, and especially again in lower income communities where air pollution is much more prevalent and a problem. And so that's what I'm saying is, like, if we can get to a position where our government is not run by this archaic system that we have, we could actually come together and find agreement. It would also
fuse the voices together.
Yes.
Right? To take all the best elements. It's almost as like Frankenstein. Almost. It's like basically, I'm calling politics Frankenstein in a sense, which is, you know, you take the best of each element from whatever and then create this amazing well, I'm talking creating a utopia. Okay, there you go.
Well,
and then we go back to then it turns into dystopia, right? But
I agree with you. Like, I just think that that's what we need, is to not be fighting over what color it is, but working together towards something.
And every party has their strengths, right? And we also know that every party has their weaknesses.
Exactly.
So then if you again address that, then it'd be like a stronger nation.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is like, particularly as Greens, we've always come out as saying multiple times, we will collaborate with any party if it is a good idea. We're not going to say no just because another party came up with it.
Because you want to see it happen.
Well, exactly. Like, if it is a good idea, you get behind it no matter what. But what we're seeing right now is that the other parties will say, well, but they came up with it, and this
so we don't want to do it.
So we don't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the most ridiculous thing ever. And I just, it's the only way we can move past. And so for me, when you say about like voting for change,
it's not really, is it change, or is it just, like you said, one part, just
one party, and they're just going to do, so like.
Is it a fantasy more or less, voting for change? Is that a fantasy? Is it real? Is it a reality?
Yeah, so in 2015, like, sweeping, everyone just went to Liberal because the promise was made, last first past the post, and that promise was broken a year later. And then we saw, of course, you know, with the next election that happened in 2019.
It's the pendulum.
And then people, when I was going to the door, there were so many people who said, I didn't want to vote Liberal, but I voted Liberal because they told me it was going to be the last first past the post. And that's what I have a problem with, is like making fake promises so you can get votes and then you don't follow through.
It almost would be a law that if you make these promises to get the votes, you have to carry it through. Like, it should be like, it has to continue.
It has to
almost,
get the support to do it.
But you can, no backseas, right?
Yeah. I like to, you have like a pinky sweat.
I know, exactly. You gotta do it, or you lose the funding, or you basically, if you don't, it's almost like this, is the accountability. You can't go on a platform and have all these promises that you're gonna do all this stuff and then don't do it. Because and then that's also false advertising, and then when people get false, you can sue people for false advertising. You know, that's like, you know, so it's kind of like, why can't you just be realistic? And if you can't follow what you're going to say you're going to try, or what you're going to do, then there should be some accountability. And there's no accountability in a sense, right?
Yeah, I guess the only accountability is that you don't win the next time, but then it just becomes again
and then it goes pendulum.
But that's why I
felt why no change.
Yeah, that's why I felt about the ODSP thing, where we had been saying since September, double the ODSP. Let's not do the license plate rebate, which, by the way, only it is an advantage for people who own cars, not for people who are lower income.
Not people who take the bus or the busing
or bikes or anything. You're only helping people who can actually afford a car. And so already right there, that is a completely
social middle class and up.
And so that was ridiculous. And so our MPP, who's the one that was in there and is also the leader of the party, said, why are you doing this? Why are you giving this rebate when you could use that money and double the ODSP rates? So then, of course, just recently, the NDP said, yeah, you know, we'll change our policies. But for me, I feel like, if you're going to make that promise, then do it. Make sure you do it. Don't do it just to get votes, just like what happened in 2015 with the false promise of ending first past the post. If you're going to promise this to people and they're going to believe you that in a year's time you're actually going to do this, then do it. But again, I would say waiting a year is ridiculous, because there's people who are choosing MAID because they can't afford to live anymore. So that really should be on the government. You
Right.
cannot let people die because you've decided that you're going to keep them in poverty.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like, for me, this is like a non-starter issue. Just
No.
it's a human rights issue.
Yeah,
Deal
it's
with
non-negotiable.
it. Yeah.
We're coming almost at the end of the podcast,
Yeah.
but one of the questions I wanted to ask, and this just came up, one thing that you would change in the system.
What's again?
She already said.
I want to get rid of first past the post.
Yeah.
I want electoral reform. I want it so badly.
In what way? Give me.
I would
Right.
like proportional representation as
Right.
soon as possible. It will be better for our government on so many levels. It would mean that we'd have diverse voices. It also means we have much more ability to have diversity within the candidates that are there. Right now, let's say, often, and I'm just going to use the example of women, even though this can be for other issues as well. Women are put in roles to run in an area where they're basically going to lose. So then you're much more likely to get a man that's going to win because they're put into the sure lose categories. Like, let's say you've got a sure riding and then you've got a party, they've decided, okay, well, this candidate's going to go there, likely not going to win. So maybe you have one male and you've got 3 female candidates, but the male's still going to win. But if you had a proportional representation system, you're much more likely to have people from a variety of races, from a variety of sexualities, from a variety of backgrounds, economic backgrounds,
Right.
immigrants,
Right.
much more likely than a system that is built on just a first past the post.
Right.
Because it could be that you are voting first for a candidate that you want to represent you, and then you could vote separately for the party that you believe in, and then you'd be taking from a pool of people that could be a diverse pool of people. So when they've done studies into this for the proportional representation, you're much more likely to have greater representation. And honestly, if we're going to move forward as a country, we have to make sure we have diverse voices at the table. Like, it just has to happen. And yeah, I mean, we're slowly getting there, but it's taking a long time.
I know.
It's taking a really long time.
I know.
Yeah. And every so often you'll see like a picture and you're like, what's wrong with this picture? This seems very homogenous.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I asked Peggy this question as well. Let's say we've got somebody that's interested in running. What advice?
What advice?
Yeah.
I have actually mentored a number of first-time candidates. I've done this before. I really enjoy helping people. I have said to people before, I might never be in the government, but I see my role as trying to be the stepping stone to help others
Mentor,
be there.
and the mentorship.
Yeah, I
somewhat,
love
yeah.
the mentorship. And I said, the number one thing is, before you go into it, set your parameters and your rules for yourself. So I was very clear to myself in 2015, this is what I will do, and this is what I will not do, and I've stuck to that since 2015, and I have never deviated from that. There was like my own guidelines. I really think it's important that you
Your
stay true
boundaries.
to yourself. These are your boundaries, and you keep that, like you guard your rules.
Your foundation.
Yeah, so you don't lose yourself. And I know that sounds very vague, but it's important to always remember who you are as a candidate and not let yourself get co-opted, I would say. Yeah.
And I'm going to touch on that. What ways can you get co-opted?
Well, I would just say, okay, so I set for my rule, and I've stuck to this, is that I will never personally attack another candidate ever in my riding, never. Because in my mind, any person who is running, in my mind, they want to be doing something good for their community, and they are a human being. I also will not use, and I believe I haven't, mostly, I think I have not, but this time I don't know. Talked about the previous, talk about leaders. Like, I will try to only talk about exclusively what our plans are and what we want to do, because as I mentioned before, we have so few opportunities to share our ideas that I don't want to waste all my time in front of an audience poking at the others.
Yeah.
So while the other parties are often just sniping
Shame
at
and
each
blame.
other,
Shit,
yeah,
yeah.
I will only talk about what our policies are. I'm never looking back. I'm only looking forward. I don't ever want to get dragged into the personal, I just really feel like that kind of animosity really alienates voters and gets people that they're not interested in politics and they're just disgusted. And we hear so many times at the dorm, like, oh, I hate all politicians and you're all corrupt. I've heard this so many times. You're all corrupt. And I was like, how am I corrupt? Like, what have I done? Like, I'm working with my tiny little campaign. Not corrupt. But yeah, just for me, it's like staying completely honest, making good relationships with everybody. I never want to be coming out and attacking people. I will correct a policy. Like if I say if I don't agree with a policy, that's fine. But I always reference the policy, not the person.
Right.
So I wouldn't say Andrea Horvath at XYZ or Doug Ford XYZ. No, it's like I don't agree with Highway 413. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that. But I don't.
It's the policy, not the person.
It's the policy, not the person. Always. That is for me fundamental. That I never
That's good.
go deviate from that.
It's respectful.
If you got 30 seconds
Yeah.
to let people know why they should vote.
Green.
So 30 seconds.
30 seconds. 30 seconds. You know what? Let's say a minute.
A
Give you
minute.
We've got a minute, right? If there's somebody that's on the fence, if there's somebody that hasn't even thought about it, right? What
Yeah.
would you say in a minute that would?
Okay, in a minute. Well, first of all, I would say that the environment is absolutely something that is crucial to your well-being, and in the next 4 years, we're going to see us breach 1.5 degrees Celsius, and as we saw in British Columbia, things can go very south very quickly. You can lose entire towns, you can lose lives, and you can lose businesses. So we have to think about what direction we want our province to go, and the decisions that are going to happen in the next 4 years are crucial. So if we're going to invest $6 billion in a highway that is going to take out valuable wetlands and valuable farmland at a time when we have food security issues and prices of food are going up, that money could go towards schools, it could go towards nurses, it could go towards mental health care supports, it could go towards addictions, it could go towards housing. Why are we investing in a highway that is just going to create more pollution? That's number one. Number two, whenever you have Greens at the table, and even Doug Ford said this, that he could work with Mike Schreiner. You can work with, who's the Green. It's because we are always willing to listen to people and act as mediators and negotiators and take the best ideas. So you need us at the table as people that will
To kind of ideas, the philosophy, because they're not specializing in it.
Yeah.
They need to have the ideas and teach them.
Yes.
You're learning from one another.
But even on issues that don't even have anything to do with the environment, it's just on like being the mediators on the big issues,
Yeah.
because when they're all fighting at each other or just sticking to like what their party lines are, nobody's listening to each other. And so that's kind of our role. We see our role as like trying to be the mediators, to bring people together.
Love it.
And that's, you know what? I'm just going to leave it on that. That's
Bringing
perfect.
people together.
Bringing people
That's what we're
together.
trying to do.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to do with this podcast, bringing people together.
And I was told that it's not a podcast. I should call. What are we
It's not a
supposed to?
podcast. We're doing like a video. It's like a live. We're doing a live.
It's a live
interview.
It's a live podcast. It's a live interview.
Because podcast is like more an auditory, so this is more like a
Yeah.
video.
Visual.
Yeah.
It's visual.
Yeah, so we should mention that I did not know that I was going to be on video, because
Yeah.
otherwise I would have made myself look better.
You fit in. You fit in with me because of you fit in with me. I don't do anything special. I just show up.
I'm still.
I leave it. To
I knocked on doors for like 5
hear
hours, and
I was focused on. I've learned so much from what you said,
Yes.
and made so many connections. And in a way, you focused on the layers and how everything is intertwined with the Green Party and with the environment, and having access in long-term health. Because if we're all sick, we can't move forward, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much money you have, because again.
Yep.
You know, health is priceless almost, right? Well,
Yeah.
not almost. It is.
It is.
It is priceless, not
Yes.
almost priceless, but it is priceless. So,
Yeah.
so you shed some light about where you know, where your party is and your philosophy, and then how it does connect with marginalized communities and the indigenous communities, and addressing, because we talk about the pipeline, we talk about the water, you know what I mean, the water and all that. And that's the same thing like in Flint. I know it's Flint, but Flint, Detroit, just 2 hours away.
Yes.
That's another marginalized community that don't even have, like, how is that possible? We're in North America, surrounded by water, having lakes and rivers, that we do not have clean drinking water for all. You know what I mean? So, you know, so those are the things to really consider. Like, we have to make sure. So you really shed some light, and hopefully to hear more. I would like to definitely learn more and having these conversations, not just only at a, you know, voting during campaign, but now these are engaging conversations to have over time to bring awareness, and where for people to make conscientious or intentional choices of what they do, what they bring in their homes, what they do, and what they contribute, and how they can help others.
Yeah, no, that's great. Anytime, if you, outside of voting, if you ever want to talk about issues, I'm happy to do it.
I think what's going to happen is, because so many of our topics are organic, and they literally come out of the conversations we have on our podcast or whatever we're going to call
chats.
Our chats. Beautiful, our chats. So I think
have a live chat.
So I think in the next few weeks, I'm actually going to sit down and we're going to talk a little bit more about climate change, right? Climate change has nothing to do with race or religion or anything like that. It affects.
But it does impact certain communities more.
It impacts more.
Right.
But it's not just, what I'm saying, it's not just a white problem. It's not just a black problem.
It's a human race problem.
It's a human race problem, right?
Yeah.
So I think those are one of the things, like I said, coming up in the next few weeks, we're going to actually get into it. So I'm going to invite, of course, I'm going to invite Carol back. I'm going to invite...
because I want to do my research now to know more about this, because you should, again, I've learned so much right now.
So I want you to pay attention. Like I said, in the next few weeks, we're actually, tomorrow I'm gonna go and look at the schedule.
Yeah, because it's June. June. What's the theme? Now we're moving forward with different topics, different ideas.
So I want to thank Carol for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Melissa, of course. This has been another edition of Real Talk Straight Talk. And you know what we like to say, it's a Faith to Black, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, people.
Yeah.
On the beat. On the beat.